My family harassed my wife at work and faked legal documents to steal my inheritance. They didn't know my father-in-law was a retired property lawyer. Hi everyone! Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Thanks to you, we can keep sharing the most shocking family stories. Let's jump in. Initial post. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I need to get this off my chest and maybe get some perspective from people who aren't emotionally invested in this disaster. I'm Michael, 28, and I've been married to Jennifer for 3 years. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland that I inherited from my grandmother 2 years ago. It's nothing fancy, but it's in a great location, fully paid off, and most importantly, it's ours. Or at least, I thought it was ours until my mother Patricia and sister Rebecca decided they had other plans. Some background: I've always been the black sheep of my family. While Rebecca followed in our mother's footsteps, same career in real estate, same social circles, same everything, I chose a different path. I work as a software developer, married young, at least by their standards, and generally kept my distance from their drama. My father passed away when I was 15, and since then, my mother has ruled our family with an iron fist wrapped in passive-aggressive velvet. When Grandma Elizabeth left me the apartment in her will, it caused immediate friction. Rebecca had always assumed she'd inherit it since she was the one who visited more and understood real estate value. The truth was, I spent every Sunday with Grandma for the last 5 years of her life, bringing groceries, fixing her computer, and just sitting with her while she told stories about her youth. Rebecca visited maybe twice a year, usually when she needed something. The apartment is worth approximately $450,000 in today's market. Not mansion money, but substantial enough to cause serious envy. For the first year after we moved in, things were tense but manageable. My mother would make snide comments about how we couldn't possibly maintain such a nice place properly, and Rebecca would constantly mention how the apartment was wasted on renters. We're not renters, we own it, but she refuses to acknowledge that. Everything changed 6 weeks ago when Rebecca announced she was getting divorced. Her husband, Stephen, had apparently been having an affair, and she needed to move out of their house. Suddenly, my apartment became the perfect solution to her problems. In her mind, at least. It started with a phone call. My mother called on a Tuesday evening while Jennifer and I were having dinner. "Michael, we need to discuss the apartment situation," she said without preamble. "What apartment situation?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Rebecca needs a place to stay, and that apartment is far too large for just 2 people. You could easily move to a smaller place while she gets back on her feet." I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. "Mom, this is our home. We're not moving out because Rebecca is getting divorced." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, in that icy tone I remembered from childhood, "Family helps family, Michael. Or have you forgotten everything your father and I taught you?" That was the beginning of what I can only describe as a coordinated harassment campaign. It started small, constant phone calls at all hours, showing up unannounced, leaving gift baskets at our door with passive-aggressive notes about helping us pack. Then it escalated. 3 weeks ago, Rebecca somehow got a spare key, I suspect from the building's previous manager who she apparently knows, and let herself in while we were at work. Jennifer came home early with a migraine to find my sister measuring our rooms and taking photos. When Jennifer asked her to leave, Rebecca said, "I'm just planning where my furniture will go. Michael understands family comes first." Jennifer was shaking when she called me. She's generally non-confrontational, raised by parents who value kindness and respect above all else. This kind of aggressive boundary crossing was completely foreign to her. I left work immediately, but by the time I got home, Rebecca was gone, and Jennifer was in tears. I changed the locks that day and explicitly told both my mother and sister they were not welcome in our home without an invitation. That's when things got really ugly. My mother started calling Jennifer's workplace, telling the receptionist she was concerned about her daughter-in-law's mental health, and suggesting Jennifer was going through something that made her paranoid and hostile toward family. She called 3 times in one day before Jennifer's boss had to intervene. Rebecca took a different approach. She started a whisper campaign in our building, telling neighbors that we were planning to sell and she was hoping to buy the apartment to keep it in the family where Grandma would have wanted it. She told our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, that I was forcing Jennifer to lie about wanting to stay because I was too proud to admit we couldn't afford the maintenance. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, came to us directly to ask if we needed financial help. The latest escalation happened yesterday. I came home to find an eviction notice taped to our door. Not a real one. Rebecca had mocked up an official-looking document claiming we had violated the terms of my grandmother's will by not maintaining family harmony, and that ownership would revert to the rightful heir if we didn't vacate within 30 days. Jennifer found me standing in our hallway, staring at this fake legal document, and she just broke down. "I can't do this anymore, Michael," she sobbed. "I love you, but your family is making our lives hell. I'm scared to come home. I'm anxious at work. I just want to live in peace in our own home." Seeing my wife, my strong, capable, loving wife, broken down like this because of my family's greed and entitlement, something in me snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a clarity way. I realized I'd been treating this like a family squabble that would blow over, but this was actually harassment, possibly criminal harassment. I held Jennifer while she cried, and I made a decision. I was done trying to handle this with family kid gloves. They had crossed too many lines. That night, I started documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every encounter. Jennifer's father called while I was organizing the evidence. Jennifer had texted her mom about what happened, and word had gotten to him. Robert is a quiet man, a retired attorney who specialized in property law before he switched to teaching. He's the kind of person who thinks 10 words when most people would speak 100. "Michael," he said, "Jennifer tells me there's some trouble with your family and the apartment." I gave him a brief rundown, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. There was a long pause when I finished. "Send me everything you've documented," he said finally. "Everything. And Michael, this ends now. Nobody threatens my daughter's peace and safety. Nobody." The way he said it, calm, measured, but with absolute steel underneath, reminded me of why I'd always admired him. In the 10 years I'd known him, I'd never heard him raise his voice, but I'd also never seen anyone successfully cross him. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep. Jennifer is finally resting peacefully beside me, but I keep running through everything in my head. Part of me feels guilty. These are my mother and sister, after all. My dad would be horrified to see what's happening. But another part of me, the bigger part, is just tired and angry. We didn't ask for anything except to be left alone in our own home. I don't know what Robert is planning, but for the first time in 6 weeks, I feel like maybe we're not alone in this fight. I just hope we can resolve this without destroying what's left of my relationship with my family, though honestly, I'm not sure there's much left to salvage. Jennifer keeps apologizing for causing problems between me and my family, which breaks my heart. She didn't cause this. Greed, entitlement, and a complete lack of boundaries caused this. I'll update when I know more. Right now, I just needed to get this all out somewhere. Thanks for reading. Update 1. My father-in-law went full legal. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I need to update you all because the situation has taken a dramatic turn that I never saw coming. First, thank you to everyone who commented with support and advice. You were right, this wasn't just family drama anymore, it was criminal harassment. Your validation helped me see that I wasn't overreacting. So, remember how I sent all the documentation to my father-in-law, Robert? Well, he spent 3 days reviewing everything, and then he called a family meeting. Not with my family, with his. Jennifer and I arrived at her parents' house last Sunday to find not just her parents, but also her brother Christopher, his wife Amanda, and Jennifer's sister Emily. Robert had printed out everything I'd sent him and organized it into what I can only describe as a legal brief from hell. He had sections labeled trespassing, harassment, defamation, attempted fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Robert stood at the head of their dining table like he was presenting to a jury. I've asked you all here because Michael and Jennifer are facing a coordinated campaign of harassment that has escalated to potentially criminal behavior. As a family, we need to discuss how we're going to protect them. Jennifer's mother, Nancy, had been quietly reading through some of the text messages my mother had sent. She looked up with tears in her eyes. Patricia called Jennifer mentally unstable. She tried to get her in trouble at work. Christopher, who works in corporate security, was reading the part about Rebecca entering our apartment. She just walked in, with a key she wasn't given. That's breaking and entering, minimum. But it was Emily, sweet kindergarten teacher Emily, who surprised me the most. She looked at the fake eviction notice and said, "This is forgery. She's impersonating a legal authority." "That's a felony, right, Dad?" Robert nodded. "It could be prosecuted as such, yes." Then he turned to me. "Michael, I know these are your blood relatives, but they've declared war on your peace and safety. More importantly, they've targeted my daughter. I need to know, are you prepared to take legal action if necessary?" I looked at Jennifer, who was holding my hand so tightly her knuckles were white. "Yes," I said. "Whatever it takes to protect our home and our peace." Robert smiled, not a nice smile, more like a shark who'd just spotted lunch. "Good. Then here's what we're going to do." His plan was methodical and brilliant. First, He personally wrote a cease and desist letter that was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It detailed every single incident, cited the relevant laws they potentially violated, and made it crystal clear that any further contact would result in immediate legal action. He had it delivered by a process server to both my mother and sister's homes, ensuring they couldn't claim they hadn't received it. But here's where Robert really showed his strategic thinking. Before sending the letters, he had Christopher's security company do a full security assessment of our apartment building. They found that Rebecca had somehow obtained not one but 3 spare keys from various sources. The previous building manager, a maintenance worker she dated briefly years ago, and one she'd had made when she borrowed my key during a family dinner last year. We had all the locks changed again, this time with high-security cylinders that can't be duplicated without authorization. The building management, horrified at the security breach, implemented a new key control system and fired the maintenance worker who'd given out unauthorized access. The cease and desist letters were delivered on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, my phone was blowing up. First, my mother called, screaming about how I was betraying the family and choosing strangers over blood. When I didn't answer, she called Jennifer's work again. But this time, Robert had already contacted their HR department with a formal notice that any further contact would be considered harassment and the company could be named in a potential lawsuit for failing to protect their employee. Jennifer's boss personally took my mother's call and informed her that she was banned from contacting anyone at the company regarding Jennifer. Rebecca took a different approach. She showed up at our apartment building, but the doorman, who Robert had briefed, wouldn't let her in. She stood outside for 2 hours, calling and texting me about how she just wanted to talk, and how this had all gotten out of hand. Then she made a crucial mistake. She went on Facebook and posted a long rant about how I was mentally abusing her and our mother, how Jennifer had poisoned me against my family, and how my grandmother would be rolling in her grave if she knew I was keeping the apartment from its rightful owner. She tagged dozens of family friends and relatives. Christopher screenshot everything before she could delete it. She tried to an hour later when she'd calmed down. Robert added it to his file as evidence of defamation and violation of the cease and desist. But the real shock came 3 days later. Robert had done some digging into the apartment's ownership history and my grandmother's will. He discovered something interesting. My grandmother had specifically included a clause that stated if any family member contested the will or harassed the inheritor, they would be barred from any future claim on the estate. She'd added this after watching her own siblings fight over their parents' property. He also found that my grandmother had left a sealed letter with her attorney to be opened only if there was family conflict over the apartment. Jennifer and I went to the attorney's office with Robert to retrieve it. I'll never forget sitting in that sterile office, opening my grandmother's letter with shaking hands. She'd written it 2 years before she died, and it was addressed to me. My dearest Michael, if you're reading this, it means Patricia and Rebecca are causing you trouble over the apartment, just as I feared they would. I want you to know that I left it to you intentionally and with full knowledge of what I was doing. You were the only one who visited me because you wanted to, not because you wanted something. Every Sunday, rain or shine, there you were with groceries and that silly tablet, trying to teach me about the internet. You listened to my stories, helped me with my medications, and never once asked for anything in return. Patricia visited only when she needed money or wanted to borrow something. Rebecca came only when she wanted to post photos on social media to show what a devoted granddaughter she was. But you came because you loved me. The apartment is yours, completely and legally. I had it structured specifically so that no one could challenge it successfully. More than that, I want you to know that you deserved it. You earned it through love, not manipulation. Don't let them bully you, my dear boy. You have always been too kind, too willing to keep the peace. But some people see kindness as weakness. Your mother and sister are such people, I'm sad to say. Live your life, love your wife, and be happy in the home I left you. That's all I ever wanted. All my love, Grandma Elizabeth. I broke down crying right there in the attorney's office. Jennifer held me while Robert discreetly gave us a moment. The attorney, who had known my grandmother for 40 years, said quietly, "She loved you very much, Michael. She was very specific about her wishes." We made copies of the letter and added it to Robert's file. He then did something I didn't expect. He reached out to a colleague who specialized in restraining orders. "Michael," he said that evening over dinner, "this isn't going to stop with a cease and desist. People like this, when confronted with legal boundaries, often escalate before they accept defeat. I want to be prepared." He was right. Update 2. The extinction burst. 2 days after the lawyer's visit, my mother showed up at my workplace. I was in a meeting when our receptionist interrupted to say my mother was in the lobby, claiming there was a family emergency and demanding to see me immediately. My manager, who knew about the situation, offered to have security escort her out, but I decided to face her one last time. I found her in the lobby, dressed impeccably as always, the picture of a concerned mother. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted to tears. "Michael, please, we need to talk. This has gone too far." "You're right," I said, staying near the security desk. "It has gone too far. That's why lawyers are involved now." "Lawyers? Michael, I'm your mother. How can you treat me like some stranger? Like some criminal? You broke into our home. You tried to get my wife in trouble at work. You've been harassing us for weeks. What would you call that?" Her tears dried instantly, a trick I'd seen all my life. I call it a mother trying to help her daughter who's going through the worst crisis of her life while her son selfishly hoards family resources. Grandma's apartment wasn't a family resource. It was hers, and she left it to me. She was old and confused. You manipulated her. We have her letter stating otherwise. Very clearly. The color drained from her face. What letter? The one she left with her attorney. The one that explains exactly why she left the apartment to me and not to you or Rebecca. Would you like me to read it to you? She actually took a step back. You're lying. I'm not, and you know it. Grandma saw through you both. She knew exactly who visited out of love and who visited out of greed. That's when she said something that still echoes in my mind. You were always his favorite too. Your father would have been disgusted by how you're treating us. Dad would have been disgusted by how you're treating his son, I shot back. Dad believed in respect, boundaries, and earning what you have. He would have been ashamed of this harassment campaign. She raised her hand like she was going to slap me, something she'd never done even when I was a child, but caught herself when she noticed the security cameras. You'll regret this, she said quietly. When Rebecca and I are gone, you'll have no family left. I have Jennifer's family, I said. They've shown me more love and respect in the last 2 weeks than you have in years. I turned and walked away, but I heard her parting shot. They're not your blood. No, I called back without turning around. They're my choice. That night, Rebecca proved Robert's prediction about escalation right. She showed up at our apartment at 2 a.m., drunk and pounding on the door, screaming about how we'd destroyed her life, and she had nothing left to lose. She kicked the door so hard she actually cracked the frame. The neighbors called the police before we could. I'll never forget opening the door to find 2 police officers restraining my sister while she screamed obscenities at me. Jennifer stood behind me, recording everything on her phone. Robert's advice: document everything. Sir, do you know this woman? The officer asked. She's my sister, but she's been harassing us for weeks. We have a cease and desist order against her. Rebecca's face when I said that, it was like I'd physically struck her. You don't have a restraining order. I checked. Not yet, I said quietly. She lunged at me then, and it took both officers to hold her back. They arrested her for drunk and disorderly conduct, attempted assault, and violation of a cease and desist order. As they led her away, she kept screaming about how the apartment was rightfully hers, how I'd stolen her birthright. The next morning, Robert was at our door at 7 a.m. with coffee and a restraining order application. We file this today, he said. Both of them. Jennifer's mother Nancy came with him. She hugged us both and then did something I'll never forget. She handed me a key. What's this? I asked. A key to our house, she said simply. You're our son, Michael. Our door is always open to you. Both of you. Family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, and loyalty. You've shown all 3. I cried again. It seemed like all I did those days was cry. Update 3. The legal reckoning. The restraining order hearing was set for 2 weeks after Rebecca's arrest. Robert had connected us with an excellent attorney, Diane, who specialized in family harassment cases. She was a small woman with a voice that could command a courtroom, and she took one look at our evidence and said, "This is one of the clearest cases I've seen." In the 2 weeks leading up to the hearing, my mother and sister apparently hired their own attorney and tried to negotiate. Their lawyer reached out to Diane with an offer. They would leave us alone if we agreed to either sell the apartment and split the proceeds 3 ways, or pay them each $150,000 to buy out their interest. Diane actually laughed when she told us about the call. They have no interest to buy out. The apartment is yours, free and clear. This is extortion. She counteroffered with something else. They could agree to permanent restraining orders and have no further contact, or we would pursue criminal charges for harassment, trespassing, attempted fraud, the fake eviction notice, and defamation. We would also file a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Their lawyer came back saying my mother and sister felt we were being unreasonable and that families shouldn't treat each other this way. They're right, Diane responded. Families shouldn't treat each other this way. That's why we're here. The hearing itself was surreal. Seeing my mother and sister at the defendant's table, their lawyer between them, while Jennifer and I sat with Diane at the plaintiff's table, it felt like I was watching someone else's life. Diane presented our case methodically. The texts, the emails, the unauthorized entry, the fake eviction notice, the harassment at Jennifer's workplace, the defamatory social media posts, the 2 a.m. drunken assault. She played Jennifer's recording of Rebecca screaming and trying to attack me. She showed security footage from our building of my mother trying to convince the doorman she had a legal right to enter our apartment. But the most powerful evidence was my grandmother's letter. Diane read it aloud to the court, and I saw my mother flinch at every word. Rebecca started crying. Whether from genuine emotion or performance, I couldn't tell anymore. Their lawyer argued that this was a family dispute that had gotten out of hand, and that my mother and sister were grieving the loss of family property they'd been emotionally attached to. He suggested mediation instead of restraining orders. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd been stone-faced through most of the testimony, finally spoke. "Counselor, your client's engaged in a sustained campaign of harassment that included criminal acts. This isn't a family dispute, it's criminal behavior that happens to be between family members." She granted 5-year restraining orders for both Jennifer and me against both my mother and sister. They were ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from us, our home, and our workplaces. No contact through third parties. No social media contact or posts about us. "I want to be very clear," the judge said, looking directly at my mother and sister. "Violation of these orders will result in immediate arrest and prosecution. This is not a suggestion. It's a legal order. Leave these people alone." As we left the courthouse, my mother called out, "Michael, please." Our lawyer and the court officer immediately stepped between us. "Ma'am, the order is in effect immediately. You need to leave now." The last time I saw my mother and sister was in that courthouse hallway, being led away by their lawyer while they sobbed. Final update. 4 months later. I'm writing this final update from a different place, physically and emotionally. After the restraining orders were granted, Jennifer and I went through a rough period. Not with each other, but individually. I was dealing with the grief of losing my family, even though I knew they were toxic. Jennifer was dealing with guilt, feeling responsible for the rift even though she wasn't. We started couples therapy, which helped immensely. The therapist said something that stuck with me: "You're not grieving the family you lost. You're grieving the family you never had but always hoped for." She was right. Robert became the father figure I'd lost when Dad died. He never overstepped, never tried to replace my father, but he stepped up in ways I didn't even realize I needed. He taught me about property law so I understood my rights. He helped me refinance some investments to improve the apartment. Most importantly, he showed me what quiet, confident protection looked like. 3 months ago, he called me into his home office. "Michael, I've been thinking. You and Jennifer might want to consider additional security measures." I thought he meant cameras or better locks, but he pulled out a folder. "I've been monitoring your mother and sister's social media through let's call it a professional service. They're not posting about you directly, but they're posting a lot about family betrayal and stolen inheritance. I want to make sure you're protected." He'd hired a private investigator to do periodic checks, ensuring they weren't violating the restraining orders in subtle ways. It turned out to be a good call. The PI discovered Rebecca had been driving by our building regularly, careful to stay just outside the 500-foot limit. She'd also been reaching out to distant relatives, trying to turn them against me. We sent documentation to Diane, who filed a motion suggesting the behavior showed they were seeking ways to violate the spirit of the order while technically complying with the letter. The judge agreed and modified the order to include a prohibition on being within sight of our building, regardless of distance. But the real change came 2 months ago. Jennifer's grandmother, who'd been following the situation, passed away and left Jennifer a small inheritance, about $50,000. Jennifer's first thought was to use it for security upgrades, but Nancy had a different idea. "Why don't you two take a real honeymoon? You never had one because of Michael's family drama at your wedding. Go somewhere beautiful. Heal." So we did. We spent 3 weeks in New Zealand, hiking, wine tasting, and just breathing. For the first time in over a year, we felt truly free. No looking over our shoulders, no anxiety about who might be at our door, no dreading phone calls. While we were gone, Robert handled something that still makes me emotional. He noticed our apartment building was considering selling the unit next to ours. Without telling us, he arranged for Nancy and him to buy it as an investment property. When we returned, he handed us a key. "We're not moving in," he laughed at our shocked faces. "But we wanted you to have good neighbors. We're going to rent it out, but we'll be very selective. Consider it a buffer zone. Their first tenants? A retired police officer and his wife. Last week marked exactly 1 year since my grandmother died. I visited her grave alone, something I'd been avoiding because I knew my mother and sister might be there. But I went early in the morning, bringing her favorite flowers, yellow roses. I told her about everything that had happened. About the letter she left, about how it saved us. About Robert and Nancy, about the new family I'd found. About how Jennifer and I were starting to talk about children, something we'd put off because of all the stress. As I was leaving, I saw fresh flowers on her grave, purple orchids, my mother's signature. They must have been there earlier. For a moment, I felt that old guilt, that pull of family is family. Then I remembered my grandmother's words, some people see kindness as weakness. I left the cemetery and drove home to Jennifer, to our apartment, to the life we'd built and protected. That evening, we had dinner with Robert and Nancy, Christopher and Amanda, Emily and her new boyfriend. We laughed, we told stories, we made plans for the holidays. Nancy raised a glass at one point and said, "To family, the kind you choose and the kind that chooses you back." Robert added quietly, "And to those brave enough to know the difference." I'm sharing this final update because I want anyone going through something similar to know, it's okay to choose peace over blood. It's okay to protect yourself from family who hurt you. It's okay to grieve relationships that should have been different. And it's okay to find your real family in unexpected places. My mother and sister are out there somewhere, living their lives. I don't know if they've changed, grown, or learned anything from this. I hope they have. I hope they find peace. But I know now that their peace can't come at the cost of mine. The apartment is thriving. We've renovated the kitchen, finally using that old blueprint my grandmother had saved. We host family dinners every Sunday. Jennifer's family, our family. The walls that once heard my grandmother's stories now hear new ones. Different voices, but the same love. Sometimes I dream about my dad. In those dreams, he's not disappointed or angry. He's sitting with Robert on our couch, both of them reading quietly, occasionally sharing some observation that makes the other chuckle. When I wake from those dreams, I don't feel sad anymore. I feel complete. To those who messaged me privately with their own stories of family toxicity and boundary setting, you're not alone. It's hard, it's painful, but sometimes it's necessary. Family isn't about DNA. It's about respect, love, and mutual care. Blood makes you related, but loyalty, love, and respect make you family. Thank you all for following this journey. Your support, even as internet strangers, meant more than you know. Sometimes we find community in the most unexpected places. Oh, and one final note, Jennifer's pregnant. We're due in spring. When Robert heard, he cried. Only the second time I've ever seen him cry, the first was at our wedding. He hugged me and said, "That child will know nothing but love and security. We'll make sure of it." And we will. Because that's what real family does.